Call whoever you want." He laughed until he heard who was on the other end of the line. "Call whoever you want." He said it like a man who had never once been wrong about how a room would end. Like the outcome was already filed, notarized, and sealed. He said it with that particular brand of cruelty that hides behind a smile, the kind that makes dismissal feel like entertainment. And so the old man with the torn jacket and the worn-out satchel reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed dial. What came through that speaker in the next 4 minutes didn't just silence the room. It dismantled it. But to understand what happened on the 34th floor, you need to understand the 9 days that came before it. Because that is the real story, not the phone call. The 9 days. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you watching from? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's go. For 9 days, Walter Reed had tried to do this the right way. He had written the letter. He had made the calls. He had sat in a hard plastic chair in a public gallery for 4 hours waiting for a city council agenda item that never came. He had walked through every door that a decent man walks through before he considers the other kind. That matters. That is the thing that nobody inside that conference room understood when they looked at him, because they had already decided what he was before he opened his mouth. The man on the other side of the desk was named Victor Crane, 49 years old, silver at the temples, the kind of confident that gets mistaken for competence. He sat in his executive chair the way men sit when the city below them has never once pushed back. His suit was the color of authority. His colleagues, 2 sharp-suited men in their 30s and a woman in pearl earrings whose expression tracked as like a compass needle, arranged themselves at the far end of the conference table. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling glass turned the skyline into wallpaper. Victor Crane looked at Walter Reed standing in the doorway and saw a punchline. He did not see a man. He did not see 9 days. He didn't know about the letter. Walter had typed it 3 weeks earlier at the public library on Corbett Street. 2 careful pages, respectful in tone, precise in detail, addressed to the corporate office of Crane Capital Development. He had outlined the situation at the building on Harlow Avenue. He had named the families. He had asked, formally and without drama, for a meeting. The letter was received. The letter was never answered. He didn't know about the 4 phone calls to the development office, for different assistance, for promises of a follow-up. 0 follow-ups. He didn't know about the city council session where Walter had taken a seat in the public gallery at 9 a.m. and stayed until 1 p.m., waiting for an agenda item that had been quietly tabled at the request of a legal team whose hourly rate exceeded Walter's monthly expenses by a factor he'd stopped calculating. He didn't know about the legal aid office on Merchant Street, where a kind, exhausted young attorney had spread her hands across her desk and told him, as gently as she could, that the demolition permit was clean, the acquisition was clean, the timeline was airtight, and without an emergency injunction, which would take weeks they didn't have, there was nothing she could do. 11 days remained. 14 families lived in that building on Harlow Avenue. Not on paper, not on any lease a court would honor, but humanly, which is the only kind of living that has ever mattered to Walter Reed. There was Diane, 56 years old, for years sober, 7 months away from her housing eligibility date. 7 months she needed more than she had ever needed anything in life that had already asked too much of her. There was Marcus Jr., 31, working back-to-back shifts at a warehouse and a gas station, his 2 sons sleeping on a foam mat in the corner of a room that was small and cold, and that was enough, that was everything. That was the platform he was slowly and stubbornly building something real on. There was Augustine and Renee, both in their late 60s, who had come from Port-au-Prince 12 years ago, and whose daughter in Atlanta was scrambling to arrange transport but needed 8 more weeks, and no one at Crane Capital cared about 8 more weeks. Walter knew all of their names. He knew which nights Diane's hands shook and which nights they didn't. He knew what Marcus Jr.'s boys called him when they were being silly. He knew that Augustine kept a small photograph of his first home tucked inside his Bible. He knew these things because Walter Reed did not help people from a comfortable distance. He lived among them. He ate with them. He walked the same busted sidewalks and sat with them in the hours when sitting was all that was left to do. This was not accidental. It was chosen with a clarity that only comes after loss has burned through everything else and left you knowing, with a precision that comfort had previously made impossible, exactly what is real. Walter had not always lived this way. 20 years ago, he wore suits. He ran a small nonprofit on the East Side, had a house on Mercer Lane, a wife named Carol who taught middle school and laughed so hard at her own jokes that she'd have to stop and collect herself before she could finish them, and a daughter named Simone who was 14 years old when the car came through the intersection on a Wednesday evening and changed the geometry of everything. Simone survived. The survival cost everything. The surgeries, the long rehabilitation, the years of medical complexity, the insurance company correspondence designed specifically to exhaust people who are already at their most exhausted. It took the savings. It took the house. It took the organization. And eventually it took Carol, not in any single moment, but slowly, in the way that too much grief carried over too many years wears a body down to something it was not built to sustain. Heart failure, the death certificate read. Walter had a different name for it. He had not returned to anything resembling his previous life. Not from defeat, from revelation. The third winter after the house was gone, sitting in the basement of a church on Harlow Avenue with a bowl of donated soup and folding chair, surrounded by people who had also lost things and had nothing left to perform for each other, he felt, for the first time, the thing he had spent 2 decades professionally trying to construct and had never once actually experienced. Real community, the specific, irreducible warmth that exists between people who see each other clearly because the armor is gone. He never left that proximity. He became the connective tissue, the person who knew where the hot meals were, which shelter had space on which nights, how to speak to the county intake system without surrendering your dignity at the door. He became, through years of slow, unglamorous, present tense work, the person that Harlow Avenue called when it needed someone to fight. Which is why, on a Thursday morning with 11 days on the clock and every legitimate channel exhausted, 14 families looked at him and asked what was left. He told them he would go in person. He would walk into Victor Crane's office and look him in the eye, one human being to another, and ask for 60 days. He told them something else too, something he hadn't said to anyone except one old friend the night before in a quiet phone call that lasted 11 minutes. "I have one more option," he said, "but I want to try the right way first. I want to give this man the chance to be decent before I make him be decent. Because if I force his hand, he'll comply. But nothing will change in him, and something needs to change in him." The old friend had listened. Then he said, "That sounds exactly like you, Walt. Go try it your way. If he won't hear you, call me back and hold the phone out." The elevator opened on the 34th floor. The receptionist looked up, then looked again. The man who stepped out was somewhere between 65 and 70, though the years had been written on him in a heavy hand. His jacket was brown, torn at the left sleeve. His shirt was open at the collar, washed so many times it had gone soft. His pants were frayed at the knee. A worn canvas satchel hung from one shoulder. In his right hand, clean and deliberate against everything else about him, a smartphone. Current model. Screen uncracked. He gave his name. The receptionist made the call. From behind the conference room door came laughter, and then, "Send him up. I want to see this." Walter told him everything. Not with emotion, with precision. The building. The 11 days. The 14 families, each by name, each situation laid out without sentimentality, but without omission. Diane's sobriety and her timeline. Marcus Jr.'s 2 boys and 2 jobs, and the foam mat in the corner. Augustine and Renee and the daughter in Atlanta who needed 8 more weeks. He told him about the letter, the phone calls, the council session, the legal aid office. He told him he was not there to threaten anyone or make noise. He was there to ask, man to man, face to face, for 60 days. Victor Crane looked at him for a moment with something that almost resembled consideration. Then it passed like weather. "Sir." The word arrived already wrapped in its conclusion. The permits are filed. The timeline is set. These people, they aren't legally tenants. There is nothing I can do. He paused and then, with the particular cruelty of a man who mistakes contempt for wit, added, "And with respect, There is nothing you can do either. His colleagues recalibrated their expressions. The room contracted around its own smallness. Walter reached into his coat pocket and took out his phone. "Then you won't mind," he said quietly, "if I make a call." The laugh that came out of Victor Crane was the kind that fills a room. Shoulders back, leaning into it, the laugh of a man who believes he has found the exact punchline he was waiting for. He gestured at the window, at the skyline, at the enormous, indifferent city spread out behind him like a map of everything he owned. "Call whoever you want." Walter pressed dial. It connected on the second ring. "Walt." The voice on the other end was unhurried, warm, unmistakable. "I've been waiting. Tell me how it went." The laughter stopped, not gradually, the way a circuit breaks, instant, total, and the room is suddenly a different room. Because that voice, Victor Crane knew that voice from C-SPAN and commencement addresses and a private fundraiser 3 years ago that had cost him $15,000 to attend. The entire country knew that voice. It belonged to a man who had grown up 2 streets from Harlow Avenue, who had stood at the pulpit at Carol Reed's funeral and wept without apology in front of everyone because Carol had fed him soup when he was nobody and believed in him before he had given the world a single reason to. Walter said into the phone, "About how I expected. I'd like you to speak with Mr. Crane if you're willing." A pause. Then, "Put him on." Walter extended the phone across the table. His arm was steady. His face had not changed once. Not when Victor laughed, not now. Victor took the phone. He pressed it to his ear. He said nothing for 4 minutes. The 2 men at the end of the table stared at the glass. The woman studied her hands. Victor went very still, then slowly nodded, then pressed his free hand over his mouth, the involuntary gesture of a man receiving something he has no prepared place to put. When he set the phone down, his face had genuinely changed. Not shattered. Opened. He looked at Walter for a long moment. "You knocked on every door first," he said. His voice had lost its construction. "The letter, the calls, the counsel, the legal office." He stopped. "You tried every decent option before you came here." "Yes. Not because you had to. I wanted to give you the chance to do it because it was right, not because you were forced to." Victor was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, the architecture of the man was gone, every layer that money and certainty builds over a person, stripped back to something underneath that might have always been there, waiting. "I looked at you and I saw a punchline," he said. "I've been doing that my entire career. I stopped noticing I was doing it a long time ago." He paused. "I'm sorry, not as a formality, as something I actually mean. I need you to know that." Walter held his gaze. "Hold on to it," he said. "Don't let comfort make you forget what this felt like." Victor straightened. 60 days. And not just time, real help. Funding, contacts, placement assistance. Done properly. He paused, and it cost him something visible. "But I need you to tell me what that actually looks like. Because you know these people and I don't." For the first time since he had entered the room, something around Walter Reed's eyes softened. "I know exactly what it looks like," he said. "I'll show you." He walked back through the lobby, through the glass doors, out onto the sidewalk where the city moved around him exactly as it always had, without ceremony, without slowing. His jacket still torn, his satchel still thin at the strap. He stood for a moment and thought about Diane and Marcus Jr. and Augustine and Renee. He thought about a building on Harlow Avenue that would still be standing tonight. 60 days had been won. 14 people had more time. And a man on the 34th floor had felt something crack open in him that might, if he tended it honestly, become something better than what he'd been before. Walter Reed put his phone in his pocket and walked back toward Harlow Avenue. He had people waiting. If this story moved you, make sure to like and subscribe for more intriguing stories.